Right.
Thanks.
So the first thing we're going to do is looking at working locally on our computers instead of on GitHub on the website. So I'll open the lesson from our overview, and then now, Oscar, what are we doing today, and why are we doing it?
Well, yeah. So, well, as Enrico already said, we are now, instead of working remotely on GitHub on the website, we will now move home to our own computer. And so there's several different ways you could do that. So we will probably mostly focus on the VS Code way because that's sort of beginner friendly. But we'll also show some terminal things. Yeah, and you can also do a lot of the stuff still on GitHub. So just cloning or just the copying, that's difficult. But yeah, most of the other stuff you can also just do remotely on GitHub. Yeah. So maybe just to ask you, how do you work mostly, Sudha? Do you?
Well, I do work locally on my machine. I do work mostly with IDEs, that is VS Code, but
Mhm.
there are a few steps that you can only do in terminal, and we'll show a way to do that from VS Code as well. So,
Okay.
um,
And so why do you not just work on GitHub? Since
well,
so
I
there are
mean,
some things that you can only do in a certain way, but yeah.
mm, so I like to have my work on my computer and not just somewhere online. And then the web interfaces, they don't have all the tools. And then if I want to run something, if it's actual code, I want to have it on my computer where I can test run it without having to have the web connection and everything. I mean, it's usually what I do is I start locally. I
Mm.
start doing something on my computer and then it's there. And then I start publishing it. I don't go to the web and have this big idea of a project that I want. I've got a problem that I want to solve, and then I write some code for it, and then it grows bigger, and then I notice, oh, this should be its own project, and then I put it in a folder, and then I realize maybe I want to share this with some other people, and then that is the latest place. That is the latest time where it needs to go somewhere that is actually shareable.
Okay. We'll also get to that later in a later lesson when how to turn like a local project that you started into something into a Git thing that you can then easily share with other people or
Yeah.
publish it. Mm, great. Um, yeah, and yeah, that's so. Those are
Uh,
sort of two of the lessons we'll go to.
yeah.
First, how to download something, then how to do some archaeology, some poking around in there if you are searching for a problem, for example. Then we will talk about how to turn a project that you have locally into a Git repository that you can easily share with others. And then we'll do some general discussion and maybe some lived experience.
Yes. And what to do
Um,
and what not to do.
yes. Great. Then I guess should we talk about discuss anything else, or should we just go to the
I
first
don't know.
exercise?
Well, maybe as a little recap, like a Git repository, what
Sure. You want
exactly
to
what
maybe
is a Git repository actually?
yeah. So well, I think those things were discussed a lot yesterday as well.
Indeed, they were
So
just the very short
yeah. So as a
Cliff's
recap,
Note
yes.
version.
So yeah, if it's just a collection of all of the files, and it also does not just contain the sort of the current incarnation of all of those of all of that information, but also all of the history and like a lot of metadata that describes how it got to that state. And so um, each commit is essentially sort of can be used as a snapshot of the entire project at a specific point in time. And it has a kind of official name, which is called its hash. And they can also be sort of, it can branch off in different directions, which can then also be merged again together. So there's an arbitrarily complicated graph that is often future you will thank you for keeping it as simple as possible. Yeah, all of that, there's a sort of secret hidden directory inside of that repository that's called .git. And everything, so all of the files of the current state that you have, as it's called, checked out, they are just in the directory, in the normal repository directory. And all of the other information that is sort of hidden away is in that .git directory. And you can use certain Git commands in order to relatively conveniently interface with that, or the GitHub interface, or the VSCode interface, as we'll show later. Yeah.
So then when we clone it, we make a copy of that, the whole thing.
Well,
yes.
Not necessarily the entire thing. You can copy everything, but most of the time when you copy, or when you just git clone, it does not necessarily by default download, for example, all of the branches. It just downloads sort of the default things that you would need. You can also tell it to clone a specific commit or a specific branch, but yeah, it's sort of flexible in that way.
Okay.
When you fork something, then that copies everything.
Okay, so that's the basically the difference between forking and cloning. If you fork something, it'll do a full copy of everything, and with cloning you get the option to copy it all, but not necessarily everything done for you automatically. Yeah, okay. So why do we not fork it to our computers?
Well, I guess you could do it, but most of the time when you fork something, that is sort of the sort of a central thing. If like, for example, if multiple people they work on a fork, or if there's a project and then new people want to add and like take over development, or like add things to that project, then you would need everything, and that's when you fork it. But when you just clone something from your own fork or from the development fork, then you clone it, because then you don't necessarily need everything. And yeah, I think that's just part of that is probably just historically how it developed. And yeah.
Okay, so how do we? I mean, now that we've got the command line and the VS Code part, right? And so maybe we start with the exercise, right?
Sure.
Sure. So there's this exercise in the lesson page, where if you've got VS Code, you can clone it with VS Code, and
could you maybe our faces are partially obscuring the URL, I think. So maybe if you move it a little bit, then you can.
I can just move this a bit, and then, but the basic idea is that you go to the the overview page, and then you click on under day 2, you click on the local work, and then it'll get you to this one. And then the exercise is to so we'll give you 25 minutes to try this out on your own before, and then after that, don't worry about it if you struggle with anything, just give it your best try. You got to decide which repository to clone, decide it can be any one really. Then clone it, create a new branch, try to make a commit on that new branch, then switching to the main branch and try to merge that new branch into the main. This will work if you have merge access to that repository, so it should be a repository you have access to. Like, for example, the recipe book that you made, the fork that you forked yesterday. And then you can compare those like you can see the steps of the exercise, and after the exercise time is done, we will walk through the exercise with VS Code as I would do it. So I would say we'll do 25-minute exercise now. That makes it exercise until dreadful with times.
12:40.
12:40. Okay.
Also, you can, down a little further down, there are instructions for command line, VS Code, and also RStudio now. And well, as we mentioned previously, you can do most of the things also just on GitHub itself. So making a new branch, adding a new commit, and so forth. But yeah, the first step you can't do because,
So
but
the instructions are here.
Yeah.
Switch whatever you want with these tabs. But we will go over those as well after the exercise. Right. Then
see you in 25 minutes.
Yes.
We'll come back. I see a lot of people have finished. No one has indicated that they are stuck. I guess we didn't mention, but you can indicate your progress or your state in the collaborative document as well. But yeah, a lot of you have found that by themselves. Before we continue, I want to make maybe 2 small corrections because, clarifications at least. So I mentioned that a clone does not copy everything. It does. I mixed that up with something that we're going to talk about later. And that's why a fork is something that you do on GitHub, and a clone is something that you do in Git. So there's sometimes a distinction, or there is an important distinction between Git and GitHub. And GitHub, when you fork something, it just clones it. Just to sort of make sure that's But well then, let's continue.
Yes, we said we do the exercise. So and we're doing it with VS Code. So here's my VS Code window, and the first step says to have a welcome screen and then go to clone Git repository, and then I've copied my URL. Actually, the one I copied is the SSH version, and the instructions say to use the HTTPS version.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about, because I'm also not a VS Code user typically. So can you use either, or like does it matter?
I think you can use either.
Okay.
And then you need to.
But in order to use the SSH version, you probably need to upload a key pair and do all of that jazz, right? Oh, it couldn't read.
Yeah, apparently.
Well,
let's try the same with the SSH version.
Well, wasn't it the SSH version? Because it says it was trying to exchange a key, right? And it's.
Yes. Well, maybe I messed it up. Let's try this one.
And that that URL still look like the SSH version that it
Yeah.
just right.
Okay. So I will have to go back to the instructions. Probably have to remove the failed attempts so it doesn't remember any weird things. I will do that off screen. If it lets me.
In the meantime, if just because I'm interested,
Yes.
Curious as to what people have been using, whether they're using the command line or another tool. So I'll just add that here. Add the progress thing.
And now we can open it.
Yeah, very good.
Right, so what is the next? The next was to make a new branch, right?
I believe so. Make a branch and then make a commit to that branch. Oh, I'm all alone here. Ah, you're back. You're muted.
My Zoom apparently crashed. It might be that we are completely out of it. That's something that happened on the outer side.
Oh,
I am here,
Hello?
so
Yeah, no,
I
you're
believe
not.
everything is fine.
Okay.
okay.
Then it was just my Zoom.
The stream or at least my preview of it is
It's
seems to be
frozen
frozen.
to what Susa was sharing before the crash, and so I can reset it to either Oscar's share or if Susa shares, then that's also
I can
fine.
start
Okay.
sharing again. It will it will change the things. So I will start sharing again now.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Um.
Okay, most people seem to have been using the command line so far, at least the people who responded.
Okay, that's okay as well. So say, can you see my screen again, like the VS Code screen?
I can, I believe.
Okay.
It's on the stream. Yeah.
Okay, so you get a pop-up that allows you to put in a new, like a
Yes.
name for the branch.
So yes, so you click on the three dots beside changes, go to branch, then create branch, and then you get a little window at the top, a little pop-up window. That way you can type the name for the branch, and then you hit enter, and then it creates a branch, but it creates a branch only locally.
Mhm.
So now maybe I can go back and I can say, under this is, I create a new file, call it Can't
The
type.
instant powder, what makes it German.
Yes. Yeah. Easy peasy. Right. So this file is now on.
And so there's an indicator that it's untracked, right? It's green, and there's
Yes.
a U next to it in the file browser.
Yes, that says it's untracked. And if I want to actually add it to the branch now, I need to tick the plus to make it to add it to the staging area. And then
So on the command line, that would be the same as git add and then that file name.
yes. So if the hitting the plus is the same as on the command line saying git add and then the file name. And then if I want to commit, I've got a nice little window here to put in the commit message.
So that window is maybe a little bit small. If I wanted to write this, like if this is if I wanted to write like if this is a complicated commit and I wanted to write a longer commit message, okay, I guess I can do that. But so normally, so when I'm on the command line, it just to git commit, then it opens a text editor and I can.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, and does something similar happen if I commit without a message?
Add anything,
yeah,
it will
just tell you to not do that.
It wasn't saved.
Okay.
So
okay, so you have to.
Yes, you have to save. Then you get a text editor that allows you to edit the commit message.
And we'll maybe we'll talk about the philosophy of how to think about how to think of commit messages a bit later.
Yes. And then so and then you can, once you're done editing, you can click the check mark thing. And then it will commit. To be honest, I usually use the short commit message because I'm lazy. I dislike typing more than absolutely necessary.
Yeah, I mostly make relatively small commits, so then I also only write a short message there.
Yes, so let's go. Let's see what the next exercise is. So we created a branch, then we did a commit, then.
Well, I guess right now we are on your new branch. How would I switch back to the main branch?
So make this a bit wider so you can see it. What I do is Here's that thing there. Yeah. So you can get click at the bottom on the branch name.
Yeah.
And then you have a selection of branches. And then you can go back to the main branch.
Okay, and merging. I guess now we want to merge the new branch back to the main branch.
Yes. So if we want to. for some reason, I've got the there.
Mhm.
I lost the repositories tab, so that's there's repositories changes and then so
Yeah, I guess if
if you
everything is
want to
squished for the
yeah,
Zoom, then everything's a bit different.
if you want to merge a branch, you go here, you select the branch that you just had, and then you can merge this into the main branch. Note that there's a main and then there's an origin main. So that means that this is what's on GitHub and this is what's on my computer.
Mhm.
Right, what was the next what's the next exercise?
We still also have to look at the graph, maybe that might be useful.
Yes. So
Can
this
one
is
do this
where
in
we need
VSCode?
well, I think with extensions you can, but I don't have them, so I'm going to do it in the terminal, and maybe you can tell me how to do it in the terminal. But so
Well,
first thing to do on VS Code, if you want to do something in the terminal, is you go to your menu, and then you go to the view menu, and you open the terminal, or hit the shortcuts, and then I will actually hide this and make this smaller so you can see. Actually, can someone in the notes document say whether the font size is big enough?
for me, it's fine, but
Right, so I'd be
maybe.
typing here.
Okay, so
That
well
was
then,
just an ls list directory.
okay, then maybe. So there is this command git log that just lets you interact with the sort of the history, and you can give it all sorts of additional parameters. And what we're looking for is -- graph.
Git log -- graph
-- one line.
-- one line.
-- decorate. And then
Lots of
--
options.
yes, and then -- all.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Enter. Yeah. And yeah,
then
that shows you.
we want to see, because it's right. This is from the beginning.
Where's yours?
It's mine. It's not there.
We are on main. We did merge, right?
We did merge, yes.
Where's the? Can you just do git log? Then maybe we can.
Sure.
Because that just. So there we should. Here we see we. We did the pudding recipe. So in there it is. Good news. It doesn't show up in the graph. That's odd.
But it seems to me that all the that simplify, restore,
It's all up,
Hang on.
all the way up there. It is.
Yeah, it was.
It's skipped a bunch, and it's okay. Okay. Well, I don't tend to use that kind of view very often. I kind of poke around in the log itself, but I guess the more complicated a sort of branching graph you have, the more useful this kind of view is, and then also the more useful it might be to use an additional tool that can maybe do a visualization a little bit better than
yes.
Than just the
But
terminal. But yeah,
I think we're already very much over time.
yes, I guess. Sorry. Then
and we will come to that, how to poke in the history after a short break.
that was the transition.
Yes. So
yeah, so we'll have a 10-minute break.
Yes, but yeah, we will first. So to recap this, we cloned the repository to our local computer and did something that we already did yesterday online. We did now on our local computer, and we will continue exploring how to work locally in the rest of the day. So for now, we'll have a 10-minute break, and after that, we will start with poking at the history. So bye for now.
Go.
Okay, so welcome back from the break. Hopefully, you got a chance to stretch your legs a bit. So now we have cloned a repository to our own local computer, and now we will look at how we can poke at the history and explore what has been going on in that Git repository a bit from the local site. So but as a first, like a bit of a warm up, let's look at it at a graphical way to look at the history. And so there is this tool, the Git history browser, which you can get by just adding the a specific string to the front of the repository you want to look at. And Oscar is maybe now showing.
So
the-
yeah, so this is the repository we're going to look at, network
Yep.
X.
And then if you replace the front bit by this Git history string,
so you mean this one?
or just follow the link on the lesson materials, then you will see that there is that you can browse the history. Like you can use your left and right keys to go back in history through the different commits, and it will tell you what has changed, who changed it, and when it was. So that's a sort of more graphical way to browse the history, which is nice if you want to take a look. But in the end, if you are looking for something very specific, you will spend a lot of time looking if you only use this kind of way. So maybe we can go to tools that are a bit more to the point. So say you were looking for a bit of text, like you were looking for places where you had before in the code written fix me because you wanted to come back to it at a later point and fix places. Then, and we'll try this on this network X repository. So have you already cloned it, or
I have not done anything yet, so I will clone it.
So you clone it from the command line, which it was a bit fast, but you basically say git clone and then
you can see the history down here if you
Yeah.
want to. But yeah, so
And
yeah,
then
now I'm in.
we are in the network X directory on the main branch. And then if we wanted to say search for the string fix me anywhere in the repository, you could use git grep and then -i fix me.
What does that do? What does the -i do?
What did the -i do? I'm not quite sure actually at the moment.
Well, let's just experiment. It doesn't find any fix me's this way.
Mm.
And this way it finds them. And it finds them even in uppercase.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So there are some to-dos in here.
Yes, indeed. But that's the current state of the repository, right? So if you wanted to do something of that same type, you could use the git log command that we used earlier as well. And then I think it's uppercase S for search. And then the same text.
Oh, let's try this again. So here.
Yeah. And then you get where it was, and it should also be
But so this shows me
at what commit you have found it.
Okay.
So
So for example, this first commit, it would be a commit that has changed a fix me, or it has either removed or added one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay. And because it is not explicit. Okay.
Okay, so if you then wanted to, because if you found with your git log, for example, and a commit that you want to look at in more detail.
So for example, this first one.
For example, this first one, and then you just copy the commit hash. And then you can use git show. You can, yep, git show and then the hash. You can look at the commit.
And here you can see sort of all of the differences. So it always shows it has removed a line and added a line instead.
Yes.
What you can also do is, so if you, for whatever reason, are not copying it, you can try to just like type in the first two. For example, I'm just typing the first two letters and it also finds it. If I try the first four, then you can see, oh no, this is ambiguous. You are giving it too little information, but you don't always need to give it the entire hash. Prefix is enough.
Yes. But if you know the full hash and you can copy it, it's because then this is the exact hash.
Yes.
You know, you'll get it. So that's how to show it. And we'll later get to how to have it more how to look at it a bit more. Like if you do git show, it'll show you in that terminal what the commit was, but that doesn't mean that you can browse the files that were on the commit. We get to how to do that later, but first, if you want to see for a given file who did what in that file on the terminal, you can use git annotate. But you need to give it a specific file in the current repository.
which file do you want to look at?
Well, the lesson suggests convert matrix. So convert underscore matrix.py. Yes. And then in this view, you will see for each line when it was changed, who changed it.
Yeah, and I guess so the way I'm showing it is maybe a little bit stunted. So because I'm squishing everything to be kind of
Yes.
better for viewing. If you have some more real estate in your terminal, then it looks a little bit more easier to it's easier on the eyes.
Yes. Because like this, it's hard to see where the lines end, but usually you will have one line and that will have the annotations. So
Maybe I show it like this, then you only see part of it, but you can see sort of, oops, sorry. Then you can see more about sort of what the lines look like or should look like for you.
one thing that we maybe wanted to quickly mention, if you are on GitHub and you want to find a hash, you maybe want to show that quickly.
Right.
Yeah, you go ahead.
So yeah, so on GitHub you can, for example, right now we're on the main branch. You can, if you just want to look at all of the commits, or yeah, you can. So this would be again a specific commit. This is the prefix for that hash, and then these are just all the commits. And yeah, so this is, oh yeah, you've seen this already. But so if we look at a specific file, let's look at the README, for example, or well, let's look at the same file that we just looked at. So network, and then it was convert matrix, this one. Then you can, so in here, instead of annotate, it's called blame for historical reasons again. So here you can see basically for every line who last changed it. And you can, so at the very right, there's this blame prior to change. So here you can find the commit, this one here then, that is the last commit before the change. So if you have a breaking change and you know sort of this line is the problem, then you can find the commit that sort of last commit before a change to that line. So it's just a convenience feature if you wanted to go back to that particular thing to try out, or yeah, to investigate further.
Right. So then last thing before we go to the exercise is how do we actually go to how do we actually get to look at the code that is in a historical commit? And that's basically, if you go back to the command line, you use git switch to change a branch, and you can use git switch with the create flag to create a new branch, like call it historic or whatever you want to call it, and then you can give it the hash of the commit that you.
I was too eager.
Sorry,
Is it master?
talking to stuff.
It is main, okay. Switch.
Give it a
typo, and then now some
hash. Do you still have the hash that you just earlier copied?
I'll just use the one that's down there.
Yeah.
In the history. Let's try that. There we are.
Yeah. And now you are on the state of the repository when that commit was done. And then you can look at it. and look at the state of the files as well, and look at all the files. Right, so I think it is now time to explore these for yourself in the exercise. We've planned 20 minutes for this exercise. And if you're absolutely stuck, you can look at the solution in the lesson notes or the lesson document.
I guess
But
some
yeah.
of these things, they are a bit tricky to do in VS Code.
Oh yes, if you are doing this with VS Code, because most of these things will be only possible on the command line, but you can always use the terminal in the command in VS Code, as I showed in the last part of the lesson for exercise 7. So open the terminal and then just use it normally. And you can always ask questions in the notes document. There aren't any stupid questions, only stupid answers. And there is also, I think, a Zoom room where you can go to get help, but I'm not quite sure. Maybe
it should be in one of the emails.
Yes, you should have gotten an email where to go if you need help. And yeah, let's start the break now. Exercise break now. Exercise goes on for 20 minutes. So bye for now. And see you in 20 minutes. Right, welcome back from the exercise. It seems like there was quite a lot of discussion in the notes about this exercise. So we will maybe go through the next through the next part, only go through it and discuss it a bit, but not show a lot. And then you have a little more time to return to the exercises if you want to, or get some more other thinking done. So the next thing we wanted to discuss is, what do you do if you notice there was something going wrong, but I don't know how long this has been going on. How long? When did this happen? I'm sure it happened. It was working at some point, but it's not working now. I don't know when it changed. So maybe we can do it without looking at the lessons notes so far. So what would you do, Oscar?
Well, knowing the exercise is well, I guess one could randomly look at previous commits, or I guess I would just start looking at the last commit. If it's not that, I would look at the commit before that, and at some point I would probably do a more systematic search, probably a bisection search. And
so basically a divide and conquer approach.
I guess, yes, I guess it's what you always do in computer science.
Yeah, at least it is one very fast way to find things. So it's nice, isn't it? So yeah, Git actually does or offers you a way to do just that. To actually do the exercise, you will have to have some way to find out to decide whether your code was working or not. So this is not something that's easily demoed quickly, but we will go through the theory, I think, and maybe show what's in the lesson. So maybe you can scroll down a little bit. So the command that you want to use is git bisect, and git bisect does is a multi-step process. So first you say, I want to start bisecting, I want to find my problem. Then you say git bisect start. on the command line. This is only working on command line. So if you're working in VS Code, you will want the terminal again. And then you find a commit where that's way back that you know that's good. And then you tell Git bisect that this command, this hash, was good. With saying Git bisect good, and then you give it the command hash or the commit hash.
And so we have an exercise code that you can use. So there's Git bisect exercise here.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess in that exercise, you don't know when it last worked, so you would probably just start at the very first commit.
Yeah.
That's how I would do it if I don't know anything.
So you can start there, and then you find a commit where it's bad, and then that's probably the last commit that you've got, because that's when you notice that something was going wrong. So you do git bisect start.
Start. Okay. Then I know that bad is now.
Like, and then
for example, like this. So the first one is this one. Okay, and then you can see we are now on an entirely different. So it shows you here the beginning of the hash, or also when you do git status, it shows you that hash. And then you can try. So for example, here 3.57, that's not quite pi. So you know this one is also bad. And then it gives you a new. And well, yeah, it does a bisection search. I won't go through the entire thing now, but this is the gist.
you try it again. And then you can say, is it good or bad?
That sounds good.
Okay.
And yeah, you can. It tells you, it estimates how many times you have to do this, and yeah, it is for, I think in total, this had what, 500 commits or so. So it to search it, that's relatively quickly, like a few iterations, and you'll find it.
Right. So this is a quick view on the git bisect. And that is all the content for the lesson. We had a look at how to look at the history in a repository, how to show specific commits of the repository once we've got the hash, where to get the hash, and how to look at who did what change with the git annotate, which is the equivalent of the git blame that you saw on GitHub yesterday.
Sorry. Yeah, there was someone who said that the explanation of bisect was too fast, but
well, okay, yes. So maybe, and then we had a very short excursion to the git bisect, which is a way of doing a search on a Git repository to where a specific change happened. What you need for it is a way to test whether that was the commit that you wanted or not. And so yes, the idea with the git bisect was not for you to follow along so much as to show that there is this option. actually something that doesn't really happen all that often in my experience. So, but if you are ever in that situation, you should know that there is a command called git bisect. That's what you should know. And then you can look up in the manual what the actual commands are. So we are now at 7 minutes to the hour. I would say there's something. So the next thing that will happen is the rather longer lunch break. And to make up for it, we will do the lunch. We will have a lunch until the full hour again. And so it's 1 hour and 5 minutes at the moment. So that's it from the instructors. Do we have anything else?
You said 1 hour and 5 minutes. So for me, it's right now 13:55. So 5 minutes to the full hour.
So the lunch hour, lunch is 1 hour.
Yes.
But it is 5 minutes before the hour. So we have 1 hour and 5 minutes lunch break.
Very well. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So for anyone who wants to, you can have a look at the Git bisect maybe yourself. If you're interested. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can show the course page quickly, show the schedule on the course page. So yeah, so we'll be back in well at the hour, and we'll then talk about how you can use Git to share your work. Allows you to well, I mean, we've already talked about GitHub, so how you can get your work to be visible for others so that they can use it. And some practical advice, how we actually do things, which parts of these are actually useful and which are not. So, and what to avoid. So hopefully this wasn't too complicated, but we did go into some more advanced things. So the next session should again be, but well,
a bit more basic.
Compared to Git bisect, we're going back to more everyday things, more practical things that hopefully you can not just follow along, but actually do yourself in your own work. Okay. But yeah, it is also good to know how powerful Git is, how you can do things that you can do these more advanced things that wouldn't be possible if you didn't track the whole history. Right? We can go and find the bug that you're having trouble with. Okay, but yeah, so we'll be back after the lunch break. What should I say? Have a good time. Have a good. Not everybody's having lunch, but if you are,
bye for now,
bon
and see you in
appetit,
an
I
hour.
guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, bye.
And we're back. I hope everybody had a good break. Yeah, so I'm going to briefly again go through the bisection part, and then we will move on to how you can publish a project that you've already started and version control it with Git, and also then publish it on GitHub. Yeah, so this bisection, bisection is supposed to be a tool that you can use if if you have a problem or you find that the current commit doesn't work anymore, whatever that means. So something that is not the way it's supposed to be, and you are certain that at some point in the past it worked, and then you can go back to that commit and check whether it actually worked back then, and then you can tell Git that well, first you tell it that you want to do a bisection now, so you do git bisect start, and then you can tell it the good commit that is still working and the latest, so the latest good commit and the earliest bad commit, and then it will automatically check out commits sort of in the middle, and you can then test whether they are good or bad and tell Git, and then it sort of conveniently, most efficiently searches for you the commits that are like it gives you commits that you can test, and then tell Git whether that was a good one or a bad one. And when you do, it will then give you the next one. And this way, you find really efficiently the last Git, the last commit that broke things. Right, and for the exercise itself, so there is this repository that we prepared that you can use. So you just clone that, and then start bisecting on that. For that, to do that exercise, you will need a Python installation, because the test that you can use in order to determine whether or not this is a good or a bad commit, you will need Python to run that bit of code, and it will then return a number, and you can decide whether that is close enough to Py for you for your purposes. I think that is all on bisect. That made things a bit clearer than my last attempt. But yeah, then let's move on to the next part, which is sharing.
Sharing the work. So yeah, we are going back to the schedule of, and then there's the current session is linked there. So click on sharing work, and then we have the lesson.
Okay, so maybe first, why does one do that?
Well, usually you don't really start with a Git repository, right? Usually you just start with some code.
Well,
and
after today, you hopefully always start with a Git repository.
But still, it doesn't really matter whether you start with the empty Git repository, you start with a folder on your machine and connect that to a Git repository. But first thing you need to do is turn that folder on your disk into a Git repository, into a local repository.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're going to practice and go through how to do that.
Very well. So yeah, for this exercise, you will just start with creating a new folder and put some stuff into that folder that you want to version control, ideally some text. And then you can turn this directory into a Git repository. And then you push it to GitHub or GitLab if you're using that. But for this, we will focus on GitHub. And then you can share it there. So
the exercise offers 3 different paths, only using GitHub, the VSCode way, and with a command line. The RStudio is currently under construction, so you're a bit on your own if you wanted to try it with RStudio. We are going to show, after you've done the exercise, we're going to show it with VSCode, which is really, really quick. And then maybe discuss a bit how it would go on the command line. But you're free to do it whichever way you like.
All right. Is there anything else, or should we just let loose?
No, I think that's about it. There's 25 minutes scheduled for this exercise. So that would make it past. As always, the notes document will stay open. You're free to ask questions in the notes document or go to your other sources of possible help. And yeah, we will see each other again at past. So bye for now.
And we're back. We're still working our way through some of the questions, but yeah. So so you've now initialized a repository in the folder, your personal favorite project, and pushed it to GitHub or some other place where you wanted to push it. Yeah, so we'll maybe do a little bit of a demo how you would go about doing this in VSCode.
So I'll switch over to my VSCode window. And I am here in a folder that has 2 files, a license and a README, that haven't been on Git at any point. So I just made them up myself. Now we go to the source control, and then we can either initialize the repository and then set up the Git connection, or we can just directly publish to Git. And then we need to, then VS Code asks whether I want to publish as a private repository or as a public repository. What should I select there, Oscar? What do you think?
So it depends a little bit. So if you choose a private repository, then for now only you can see it, but you can also give other people access to it. So you can still collaborate with other people. For a public repository, everybody can see it immediately. So if you have something that you don't mind just publishing, like sharing it with anyone, then you can pick a public one, and otherwise it would probably be better to go for private.
Well, there isn't anything in here, so I think it's fine to put it as a public repository. I want both these files. And then it's waiting. Now it wants to commit. Commit message. I hate writing commit messages.
Initial commit is a good one. Very classic.
Yes.
Seems to be thinking quite hard about that.
I don't know.
Ah, okay. So
and now I can even open it on GitHub.
Okay, so this creates now a new repository on GitHub?
It creates a new repository on GitHub with the name of the repository. And it's got my license
When
file.
did you pick that name? Is that just the name of the folder, or how does it...
Yes. That was when there was a message asking, is this, so it's the name of the folder, and it was asking me whether this this name was okay. And I was checking, is that a valid name? Is it taken? And then it says, we suggest this name, is it okay? And then you could probably also change that name, but I didn't.
And I guess it's possible that that name is not allowed because you already have a repository with that name in your that namespace.
It might be.
Then it would probably give an error or something.
I think it would actually just make a suggestion of a slightly different name. But yeah, so it's got the two files here on Git.
Okay. Was
and
that the entire
that's
exercise
it.
already? Very good. Wow, that was easy then.
Yes, that is really,
guess-
really easy. It's not that much more work on the command line, isn't it?
Well,
Like,
I guess usually on the command line does not create a GitHub repository for you.
yes, okay,
Usually.
if I go back to the lesson, and then we
Mhm.
can use the command line instructions for the exercise.
Mhm.
So you on the command line, you need to make it, you do need to do git init first, right?
Yes, so that creates this .git folder that contains all of the history and everything, and sets all of the metadata up. And then I guess the -b main, usually it's probably gives you a default branch, and I think these days that is main. I think in the olden times it was master. But yeah, then you just add your files as you are used to.
And then commit. And then you've got a local Git repository. And then that's where the slightly more difficult step begins, for at least from my perspective, because you need to create an empty repository on GitHub, but GitHub gives you all these, tries to push creating a README and everything on you. So you need to remember to not make it add a README, because otherwise there's going to be something in that repository.
Yes.
And then
But if that turns out, like if you add a README, if you are convinced by GitHub to add a README, then that's also not a huge problem. Then it will just, when you try to push to it, it will just say, well, you have to resolve all of these conflicts first. So then you will have to pull first and resolve the conflicts, and then you can
yes,
push. But if you want to avoid jumping through those hoops, then you just create a completely empty one.
yes.
Because some of the things
And
that GitHub suggests to you are actually quite useful. Like the default git ignores that it has are often quite handy. I like those.
Yeah. So I think VS Code actually does also have the option to add a default git ignore.
Oh, mm-hmm.
Not quite sure where it is at the moment, though. So I'm not going to try to find it on screen.
Yeah.
And then, but from the command line, now that when if you got a repository, then you have this. You want the SSH version, right? Because HTTPS doesn't
so
work for pushing anymore.
Yeah, normally you cannot, like for security reasons, the authentication, you cannot sort of HTTPS password authenticate anymore. So you would need to have set up SSH keys, and then you would need to use the SSH version of the URL to push to.
Oh yes, that's one thing that VS Code does more or less automatically for you. So this didn't happen when we were showing, but the first time you used VS Code, you will get a pop-up asking you to authenticate to GitHub, and then it will save your authentication and use that to authenticate you towards GitHub. So you don't even need to, I don't think you even need to set up SSH keys.
Well, only I guess earlier you could also use the SSH version, but you didn't have to. It also worked with the HTTPS for this one. Yeah, I'm trying to think whether there's a sort of a compelling reason why one should recommend setting up SSH keys anyway. If it works with HTTPS, someday that you might run into a situation where you would need it, but then just do it then. So do whatever.
I mean, it's not a big deal, right? You create an SSH key, and then I mean, there's instructions in the install session.
Yeah, there's
documentation
instructions
for
that yeah, on GitHub itself also that are, I would say, quite comprehensive, that are useful.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and I think everything else just works. As soon as you've set that up, you just continue working in VS Code as you
Yep.
normally would, or on the terminal, or in whatever
Yes.
you're using.
And then you can, just as we saw with the other ways, you can commit your changes and push them. But I think we will discuss pushing and using the remote repository more in tomorrow, actually, when we're talking about collaborative working.
Yeah. Then it gets a little bit more interesting when you have to actually contend with other people also.
Yes.
Messing around in there. Okay. Well.
But so there's a little bit of discussion on the lesson about remote repository. What is a remote repository? But I think, yeah, you can read that. What I think is more interesting is, why would you say you're working on something just yourself? Why would you actually use a remote repository?
So I guess there's a number of reasons. So I always work in Git whenever I work on any kind of text. And then, well, it's useful to just, for example, if I'm working on different machines, then I can use that to synchronize it to different machines. If I to have a backup is usually quite useful. If one of those aforementioned machines gets lost, then not my entire work is gone. Yeah, I think, and then just if I at some point needed to share with someone after all, then it's right there, and then it's easy. And at least for my work, that happens quite a lot. At some point I've been working on some on some piece of code for some time, and at some point somebody else would find that useful, so I can just share the GitHub link with them, and they have it. And they also have all of the sort of metadata that is in that GitHub repository to understand sort of the history and how things came to be.
Yeah, I think for me, the most often the reason why I put something on GitHub or GitLab or wherever is because I work on different computers. So I work in the office on a computer, and I work on a different computer at home, and when I'm working remotely, or sometimes I even have to use my own private computer for some things. And then it's very convenient. It can get a bit confusing because you can maneuver yourself into situations where you've remote mounted a repository and a folder from a different computer that has the repository, and you have your own local repository copy. That gets confusing. So try to avoid that.
Yeah, I pretty much never remote mount anything anymore. So one thing maybe that's also might be interesting to mention is that, so if you're working, for example, on our HPC machines, then you are at some point also working on a different machine. And there you might sometimes also want to remote mount something on that machine, but or you can use Git to synchronize things. So there's different ways of doing that again. In whatever works for you.
Yeah.
I tend to just use Git and clone stuff around. Yeah.
One more thing that's really, I think a lot of my older projects, I don't have them anymore locally, but they're still on Git somewhere, on GitHub. So if I ever have the time to pick them up again, they'll be there. And I know I've got that sort of safety net that it's not going to be lost.
Yeah, if you just kept them on a local drive and then use at some point have a new machine or something, then
yeah,
you might lose track of things. Yeah.
Right. So maybe we should be heading into the break a bit earlier.
There's maybe one more thing to discuss, the last step or the last part there on for the lesson plan.
True, yes. So the question is putting software on GitHub or somewhere publishing?
Well, I guess technically it is public.
If it's a public repository, yes.
Yeah.
But published does not mean findable in a lot of cases. It also goes for other locations where you traditionally publish things, but yes.
So it is not fair in the
Yeah.
in the fair science sense. For that, you might want to do some additional things. Especially for the science thing, citability is maybe something that is useful. Well, that's not just software, but also data. Like citability is really useful for lots of kind of different kinds of information. And for that, there's different services that you can use.
Yep. I've only ever used Zenodo, but
yeah, me too.
I hear there are similar services that you can use.
Yeah.
But yeah, so technically it's publishing, but in practice it is only the first step to actually getting it published, and because it doesn't make sense if you publish it and no one can find it. So for that, there are other.
And since the search engines are getting worse and worse these days, you have to, and the AI doesn't necessarily know about your stuff either.
Yes. So. Well, with that said, I think we have about 10 minutes break now, and then after that we will discuss a bit more about how we actually use Git and what are good practices, good enough practices, what are maybe not so good ideas.
Yeah. We'll also, if there's any, we'll pick out some questions maybe to discuss in some more detail. And yeah, if we have not extensively replied to all of them, then we'll catch up on that.
Okay, so we would go into the break now, and break time will stop at 2 minutes before the hour, so at 58.
See you then.
Richard, can you start the break? All right, welcome back after the break. We are now on the last bit of today's date, and we will maybe do a bit of a more discussion-like thing about what to do and what not to do, what are good practices. So we will first look at the practical advice. If you go back to the schedule, you can click on the link as I do now, and then it will open the current lesson. And then, yeah, here's a few topics that we think might be useful to discuss. The first one is if you're working on the command line to use git status. So maybe I'd like to talk about command line versus more graphic user interface ways first. Oscar, what do you like better, command line or UI?
I don't use any IDEs. I use just command line. I use a Vim as a text editor, and I kind of, when I started writing things on the computer about 20 years ago or so, I started in an IDE actually, and I found that sort of frustrating because I always felt it was hiding things from me it wasn't really showing me what was going on. I found that annoying. And then I found it a lot more easier to understand what things are actually going on when there's just a terminal.
So how do you not lose track of where you are on the command line?
Well, it's similar to when you just not sort of Git specific, but you just use a lot of ls and pwd in order to know where you are, and then you will get some sort of a sense of where you currently are, and then just use git status a lot in the same way to remind yourself.
Yeah, I guess this is git status is the one command that I use most often. Like when I start working on a Git repo, or I open something, I start by typing git status, and then I remember something might have changed, so I go git fetch, and then I do git status again.
Yeah, but so also because I'm mostly working on the command line, I have the command line configured in a way that is helpful for me. So I think someone already mentioned in the notes, I have like my shell prompt already gives me information about the status of my Git repository that I'm currently in. And the editor does as well, similar to an IDE. And so then you sort of use it maybe a little bit less, but still you do it all of the time.
Right, then commit messages. I already said at some point, I think, I hate writing commit messages.
I think in a sense it's similar to writing comments,
Yes.
except I like commit messages kind of more because comments, because everybody doesn't really enjoy writing them, they then get stale because they then describe a state of the code that is not actually there anymore. But the nice thing about commit messages is that that's not true. They are only specific to that very commit. So I actually like them a lot more. And well, I don't think I spend a long time thinking about commit messages. Yeah, I would say I write relatively small commits and then also relatively short commit messages. And yeah, I don't know. What do you do?
Well, what I do is mostly I commit small things, yes. So, and then the commit, usually I do things in a branch. So the branch name tells what's going on. And then the commit is, a lot of the time what I do is I commit at the end at the end of the day, like, and then I just say status and the date, just really a null commit message, right? It doesn't really tell you anything about the commit, apart from that it was
I'm not sure about that. I think
the last thing I did.
Yeah, if I read that, I would think, okay, this is sort of this might be broken, which is already something that's good to know. I know this is sort of not a complete. This is sort of an in-between state, and I think that's a useful information to have. So it is better than this is a commit message.
Yes. Okay. True in that way. But yeah, I do write very, very, very short commit messages. But I try to keep branches small. And then I do write, when I do a merge commit, then I write a longer description of what's going on and why.
Yeah, I think that's also similar. So working in branches and then sort of a description or justification for that branch is then more deserves a little bit more thought than just any of hundreds or thousands of commits you're writing.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I put in a commit message where I think it is broken. Like, still not doing this or whatever. So I know where to pick it up back when I'm getting back to it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, mostly I don't work with lots of people on the same branch, on the same topic. So it's mostly internal.
Yeah.
To remind me. And that's, yeah, but I think commit messages get more important if you're working, the more people you're working with, the more important the commit messages get.
Yes.
And or
also the less you know the people that you're working with.
yes.
If you're in a huge project where if you're just working with one other person and you know them really well and you know how they sort of think about commit messages, then you can sort of infer more. And if you know these people not at all, then that's more difficult.
Yeah, but one really, really important thing is the last advice. It's better to make any commit than no commit.
Mm-hmm.
And if the writing the commit message means that you're not gonna commit it because it's too much effort to write the commit message, then this is a better commit message than not committing at all.
Yes. And also, well, if stuff breaks, then we can also look at the commits that are coming before and after and at the context. So
yes.
Even, yeah, not all is lost if you don't have to. The important thing is that you commit your stuff.
Yes. And often.
Yes.
How often do you commit?
So I don't do the end of the day thing. Currently I'm thinking of a repository that I'm working on that has uncommitted things in it because I am working on it. So sometimes I still have a virtual terminal session floating around on a remote computer somewhere that I need to get back to. And so sort of when I finish that thought, I commit what's going on, and then I close everything and sort of start again. That's normally how I do it. I'm not sure whether that is kind of ideal or even recommendable, but I guess I'm still sort of kind of attached to at least finishing a thought in order to, yeah. So I have to say that I don't quite follow this advice, but maybe I should.
Quite often, the way my life is at the moment, I can't finish the thought before I have to do something else.
Yeah.
So and leaving it floating around, I know that I will not get back to it and still have that same thought and know where I've been. So it's safer to commit it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why it's nice. So that the sort of the terminal state that I'm working in is preserved. So it is relatively easy for me to return to something that I've left. But yeah.
Yeah. All right. Then what level of branching complexity is necessary for each project? That really depends on the people involved with it, I would say. What do they like? What's the most complicated branching structure you've ever seen?
So I guess so. I've worked on relatively few large and really complicated projects, and most of them are really, I would say, quite good about the way they do it is you make a new branch for a feature. And I'm not sure how much we discussed this, but there's when you merge a branch back to main, you can just sort of do this via a merge commit, or you can also rebase. So rebasing means you take that branch and you cut it off and then you put it back on top. And this way you can have essentially that in that tree that you're building, the trunk just gets ever longer and the sort of more recent branches are all at the top. And this way you have a relatively sort of tidy history in a sense. And the most of the projects that I've were involved with in any way kind of followed that that rough idea that you always rebase before you merge a feature branch back into main.
Hmm.
Yeah. How about you?
Well, nothing. I mean, like the usual. You branch and then you merge and then the main moves forward.
Mhm.
Hmm. I don't think we do much rebasing. It's
Yeah, rebasing, it's sort of it is a little bit of a hassle in the beginning, or it can be when you have to do it. But if you then have to at some point return and like dig through the history, then you can be rewarded for doing that. Yeah, and if you do it like consequently from the beginning, then it's also easier.
yeah. But maybe we can have a few more people, a few more opinions from a few more like seasoned people. So I don't know, Richard, would you maybe join us or Enrico?
Test.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear or see me out there?
I can see you and hear you.
Can do both.
I'm
Okay,
losing my
good.
voice, but
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you've been in this business much longer, I think at least.
Maybe. I don't know, but anyway, yeah, it's good to get more thoughts about stuff.
What was
So,
the most complicated
the
branching structure you've ever seen?
I mean, most projects I do at most have a pull request based workflow, which is something you'll see tomorrow. So basically there's one main branch and then people can work on features separately, test them, and then get them merged to the main code that everyone's using. I guess the main reason it would get more complex than that is if you have like multiple deployments or multiple versions of the code that need to be used by everyone at the same time. And yeah, like it can work, but to be honest, most of our scientific projects aren't really like that. I mean, maybe something like NumPy or SciPy or R or Python. I mean, it will have the old version that's still being maintained for a few years while a new one's coming, but that's not really relevant to most of our stuff. So yeah, as simple as possible. I mean, most of my projects, I just push directly to main because I'm the only one using it. There's no reason to make a pull request if no one else is going to know about it. And if I break it, it's my job to fix it. So I'm fine with that trade-off.
I guess if you're working alone, the only reason to use multiple branches at all is if you are working on multiple features at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess
yeah,
maybe some people work like that, but I guess probably most people will finish one thing before they start another thing. But yeah, it depends on sort of how you organize things.
Yeah. There's some reasons, but I definitely say like some other people in the notes are saying the simplest thing that works for you is the best for you.
Yeah, indeed.
Unless you just want to learn stuff, in which case, yeah, go try stuff. But yeah. What else is there to discuss? What other practical stuff?
Well, the next topic that we've got on the lesson is staging and committing.
Is that something we even talked about today? I think that's now mostly.
Well, no, I think
yesterday.
it was. I think that the committing was discussed on day one.
Okay. Yeah.
And we briefly mentioned that in the when we showed how to put a repository on on GitHub that you then need to make you commit.
Yeah.
To make it, to put things into the repository. But yeah. So how often do you commit, Bridget, if you're working on something? I mean, we've
Guess that depends on if it's a new project or an old project. If it's a brand new project and I don't know what I'm doing yet, it might either be quickly because I might break it at any time, or it might be not so quickly, more like every day or something once I get to a good benchmark, because I figure smaller commits don't really give me much. Like, I mean, yeah, like I'm probably going to break it no matter what, but I'm just right there so I can fix it. I really want to start committing when I'm worried I'll do something that will break something else. And then it would take me days to go backwards and figure out what happened. I fix it, which definitely has happened more times than I'd like to admit. I'm here working on my research code and suddenly there's some obvious bug to it. And I didn't commit in several days. And I don't know where the bug started. And it takes several more days to figure out what I did in an hour and undo that. And that's enough to scare anyone into committing often, if you ask me. Like, and for that, it doesn't matter what the commit message is, how small it is, as long as there was anything before I did this, I would be able to go backwards to it. So yeah.
To me, it's a bit, the more people are involved in the project, the more often I commit. Like if it's just me doing something, it's like, okay, yeah, I'll commit at the end of the day. Or I try to remember to commit at the end of the day. Let's put it like that. But for things where I've been working with others, I did commit quite often.
Yeah.
In a way
Very true.
To have things to go back to, or if someone said, "Can you merge now so I can see where you're at?"
Yeah.
That I could quickly.
Yeah. And it's like the way to explain what happened. So to tell people what I've done to the code, I don't have to go tell them I've changed this, that. They can look at the recent commits, see, okay, yeah, X and Y and Z has happened and none of it affects me. So I'm just going to go on. And then they can ask more later if needed.
I think that's more or less the topics of
Yeah.
critical things. And then we have one last thing, which is what to avoid when using Git. About what to avoid when committing, right?
Don't add your SSH keys. So
yes.
Don't add private data.
yes. Don't add private data, especially don't add sensitive private data.
Yeah.
Because it is a real hassle to get it out again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was an analysis done at some point about how many secrets are just public on GitHub, and it's there's a lot of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because even if you delete something, it won't be deleted unless you retroactively delete it from history as well, which is
for some things it is just like, if you want to be absolutely sure, it is impossible. It is like actually, because you don't know who cloned it in the meantime and all of those things. So for those things, you just have to like regenerate those secrets and invalidate them.
If it's a public repository.
Yeah.
If it's
a private one, there are exploits. You don't. So while pushing stuff on GitHub is not publishing it, it is also not no longer any more, secret in the sense that.
So.
Yeah, well, but if it were, say, you had something in the Git repository on your computer just to make the versioning.
Yeah, that's
there you can be pretty sure that no one else cloned it.
Yes. Of
Yeah,
course.
yeah.
So yeah, but it's still, it is, I had to do that once when I just started my my first postdoc. It's a hassle. Don't do it.
Go.
So that is where the git ignore file comes in.
Yeah.
Anything that needs to be in the same folder as your Git repository but should never ever be committed, you can put it in the git ignore file. And this
Mhm.
also helps with the sort of the generated files. And if you're using IDEs, they all create their own workspace files or whatever they are called.
Caches.
Nope.
Mm,
They actually create a folder, a hidden folder that has their settings and everything and stuff for that workspace, the IDE. And you don't want to commit those. That's just,
okay.
it's not going to be useful for anyone else.
It's like your own stuff or something. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's something that you,
Yeah.
if you're using VS Code or RStudio or
Yeah. Maybe we could
anything else.
say, can we define what generated files means? What's a good example? Maybe like LaTeX document. So if you're writing a paper in LaTeX and you're using version control, you have the source code for the paper in LaTeX, and then you have the PDF that comes out of it. And there's no need to commit the PDF because it can automatically be made from the other stuff.
Yeah.
And
But
then,
also some like intermediate files. It also creates this dot
yeah,
out and some.
right, yeah. So all this other stuff. And then you'll always get messages that say all these files have changed every time you rebuild the paper, but it's not really useful to see that, and it just distracts you from what's actually being changed. So
Actually, sometimes, especially in the writing paper case, I would be tempted to say, if you have a version that you discussed with other collaborators that you send to your supervisor or something for comments, save that as a permanent version. I mean, you can get it back, but maybe you want it permanently there.
I would tag
But
that.
you can tag it, sure. But
yeah,
then you need to have an extra step if you want to go back to it.
Yeah.
If you want it, if you want two versions at the same time, you can put them in there and they will stay. But then I would also rename the PDF file to something that's not the same generated file.
right, yeah.
But yeah,
What
that's,
else?
I guess, personal preference.
Yeah.
Just compilation output. So if you're writing in the like old school compiled languages, then all of the actual executables and libraries and stuff will probably not be committed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And more
Yeah,
things that you should
down.
commit.
I guess we already talked about postponing commits before.
Yes.
That's, yeah.
But let's talk about
Unrelated.
huge files first, because
Mhm.
these are files that you don't ever want to commit, at least to GitHub.
Yeah.
That's probably your data files.
Mhm.
GitHub is for code and well, maybe paper writing and that, but it's not for data.
Yeah.
Enrique, do we have any advice on where to store data if you want to have it version controlled and published?
Yeah, this is actually something that we will cover next week on the kind of sharing aspects and social aspects of coding, sharing code and sharing data. And there are different practices, but for example, keeping the data in one repository or with one system, we will mention this type of other extensions to Git, like Git Annex, and the code with the different repository. This is also a good way to keep the truly private stuff, which could still use a repository that never leaves the computer, and the public stuff that can go to GitHub and so on. But I don't want to spoil the fun. This is next week and the week after's topic. So
Yeah.
Okay,
By the
so
way, we have there's feedback in the bottom of the notes that you can be editing while we're doing stuff here.
yeah, and we have 5 minutes
Yeah.
to wrap up.
So we also already discussed the postponing commits, committing unrelated changes together. I think it's
Yeah,
better
what?
to, if you don't have the time to put them in separate commits, it's better to commit
Yeah.
them than to not commit them at all. So
Yeah. Like, the few times when I've hurt myself by breaking something has always been when it said, I don't want to commit now because I have to separate out the different stuff I've done. So I don't have time to do that now. I'll do it later. And then I add something more and everything goes bad. So yeah, I mean, definitely if it's better to commit something than try to make it too perfect.
okay. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
what to avoid when working with batches.
Who here has the problem? Sometimes you begin doing some work and then it comes time to commit it and then share it to push it, which we'll learn more about tomorrow. And then you forgot to pull first. So you're not working on the latest copy. And then it's like so much work to recover those.
Yep.
Too often.
Which,
Well, it happens to me all the time, but usually it's not that difficult. You just you try to push, and then it tells you no, you can't do that, and you pull, and then you fix the
well,
the few.
that's the best case. But the few times when it actually is difficult, then yeah, I'm regretting my life then. And I mean,
Well,
it is not like this is a problem with Git. Basically, it's like saying you start working on a document before you ask the other collaborators, can you send me the latest version of it? And then like, yeah.
Well, then I will also do
So,
like a lot of duplicate work usually.
Yeah.
I guess
Then
when for code that doesn't happen that often.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. Yeah, and these other things like over-engineering stuff, trying to make your little project too advanced. Most stuff is small, so
yeah.
that's completely fine.
Don't make it more complicated than it has to be. That's
Yeah.
a KISS principle, right?
Yeah.
Applies to everything.
Should we begin
Keep it
wrapping
simple.
up for the day? We can keep
Yeah, I guess.
having more comments or questions from people down
I'll
below.
change to the notes.
Okay. So what did we cover today? Was it basically everything in the schedule?
Yes, basically everything in the schedule. So we started out by cloning a project from GitHub to our local machine and looking at it locally. Then we looked at how to, once we've got it locally, how to get it, to dig into it, what's happened in the history. Then after the lunch break, we did the inverse version when we have a folder on or a project on our machine and want to put it on GitHub. And then now we're discussing, or for the last few minutes, we have been discussing what we actually do or not do. And that's it. So what's coming tomorrow?
Yes. So tomorrow, day 3, will be about collaborative Git. And in my opinion, it's the best day of this days. No offense to you, you did an amazing day today. But what I'm trying to say is that you really see the power of Git, that you can really, after tomorrow, you can literally go out, find the project that you like, find a typo, find an error, suggest a improvement, and start submitting pull requests and help any software projects, or it doesn't even have to be software, it can be web pages, documentations that are hosted with Git. So it's really the best that you can get out of it. And so because of this, there will actually be, we already mentioned this in the email last afternoon. There will be also in this other evening, in the second email that will be sent today. So for those of you who are not in an in-person room and are planning to do this type of, collaborative work with us on the stream, you will need to request access so that then we can add you to the repository so that you basically have the rights to push changes, accept other people proposals, and so on. So please follow the instructions in the email, and we will also highlight them here at the ends of the notes. And thanks for the feedback. This is fantastic. It's really what we need. Anything else? We would be 1 minute over time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
you
I
know.
guess we should call it good. Any comments or feedback?
Yes. So, well, maybe wrapping up,
Yeah.
the feedback is there. Thank you so much to Susa, Oscar, Richard, Jarno, and all the helpers, visible and invisible, that have been there, answering all the questions, helping people in Zoom. I think it was a successful day.
Yeah.
We will continue tomorrow. The videos, as soon as we press stop, the video will be immediately available to Twitch TV. And write all the feedback you want. We always take feedback into account. So I think we are good to go.
Yeah, great. So see you tomorrow, we hope.
Yes.
Okay, bye.
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 Bye, everyone.